Poverty is not just the absence of money, but the absence of opportunity. And the United States is a country where you have both freedom and abundant opportunities. Moving to the United States has given me both. I grew up in Lagos, Nigeria. I came from a close-knit family. I was the third of four children. And the best thing that my parents gave me was the gift of education. Even though I came from a poor family, they gave me education with the instruction that this is the tool that will help me to dig my way out of poverty and ignorance. But what my parents did was that they instilled in us the value of faith, hard work, and not giving up. They made us realize that if you put in the work, you will definitely get the reward. I came without a dime in my pocket. All I had was big dreams, determination to succeed, and the resilience. I got my first job at the age of 14. My job was on a construction site. My duties were to move concrete on a large pan from one end of the construction site to another one. I worked on that day from around 6 in the morning to about 7 at night. At the end of the day, the employer refused to pay me. And the reason was because she did not authorize the foreman to hire me. So I worked from sunup to sundown and didn't get paid. That tore up my spirit. And from that moment on, I decided that I was going to become a lawyer. And I was going to use every ounce of strength within me to fight against injustice, regardless of how powerful the opponent is. I am a man that worked my way up from nothing. I know what it means to feel like you're being unfairly treated, and I'm the person that can stand up to opponents regardless of how big or how powerful they are. Welcome to this episode of Legal Angle with Emmanuel the Law Olawale. I have a special guest with me today. He is Representative Jeff Crossman. He's also a candidate for Ohio Attorney General. He's going to be educating us and talking to us on the show today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Can you tell us a bit more about yourself?
Yeah, first of all, I want to say I really enjoyed the intro to the show here, and I think your experience and is very similar to sort of a lot of people's experiences, including mine. Right? I mean, I grew up in a very working class environment. There were times when my parents were divorced that we didn't have a lot. We didn't have even food in the refrigerator, so we were taking emergency food from the church from time to time. And so we knew what it was like to struggle. We knew that if we worked hard and we could probably try and get ahead. I also had my first job when I was 14 years old. And definitely got the sense of right and wrong growing up when we saw people get treated. For example, my mother was told at one point that when we were looking for housing, that they would not rent to someone who had been divorced. They didn't rent houses to divorced women. So these sorts of rights and versus wrongs were made an indelible impression on me as a young person. And we also knew, of course, that the importance of faith, community, and what education represented, which was an opportunity to succeed. So, I was able to go to college. Never thought I would be able to afford it, but we were able to get it done. And worked really hard through college, working jobs in addition to going to core classes. And I went to law school working full time and going to law school in the evening. So bottom line is I know what it's like for many Ohioans or in the state of Ohio who have to struggle to get ahead and just want an opportunity to better life. So that's what I'm doing in public service now, trying to give an opportunity to get back to my community, get back to my state, and try to come up with opportunities for people so they can succeed and live their version of the American dream.
Thank you. You grew up in a small town in Ohio called Wycliffe, Ohio. What
That's
was
right.
it like growing up in Wycliffe?
Wycliffe was a very working class town. It's a town of about 11. We call it small, so I don't know what people's version of small, but it was about 11,000 people, and it was about 15 miles east of Cleveland. Everybody knew each other in town. It was, like I said, a working class town. Nobody was wealthy, and everyone worked. And we were probably at the on the lower end financially of the working class town. My grandparents lived in, my whole family lived in town there. And, so like I said, community was very important to us. Family was very important to us. Faith was very important to us. And, every day I rode the school bus past the factory where my grandparents worked. They worked all their lives and retired from the factory jobs that they had there. And when I was a senior in high school, there were 1,200 jobs in that one factory that I passed every day. And if you go back there now, that town is really been hit hard because of that company's out of business and it's empty, and the company down the street from that is out of business and empty. And these were companies that employed people in town and had very middle class jobs because of the jobs they offered there. But they're all gone, and I think that's the state of affairs across the state of Ohio. If you go anywhere from Toledo to Ashtabula or Cleveland to Cincinnati or Dayton to Youngstown and anywhere in between, there's a lot of empty buildings across the state of Ohio where jobs used to be. So I could definitely understand that experience and how others feel across the state.
Mhm. While you were growing up in Wycliffe, Ohio, and seeing and looking at all those factories, seeing uh, grandfathers, fathers, mothers working in those factories, did you also dream of growing up to get a job in those factories?
I didn't know what I was going to do, to be candid. I think, my mother had hopes for me that I would go on to college. I didn't know if it was feasible because I also knew college was expensive proposition and we were not a family of any means. So we had dreams on moving on in terms of our education, but I didn't know if that meant me moving on and going on into the military service. I think that looked like a possibility for me. But I had some really good, dedicated public school teachers growing up who encouraged me and to find a way forward to go on with my education. I don't know, they saw something in me, I guess. And, thank goodness for those really strong teachers, those really good motivators, because I think I probably would have done something else. And those opportunities would have been, there's nothing wrong with pursuing different opportunities, but I think my mother's hope for me was I'd go on to college. My mom never had a chance to go to college. She got married young and had children young, and she always wanted to be the lawyer. So she was hoping that one of her kids would go on to college and become a lawyer.
Wow, she must be very proud of you.
Yeah, she was very excited for me when I went into law school and graduated law school. And she never got a chance to see me get to the state house. Unfortunately, she passed the year I got elected to the state house.
Yeah, well, I'm sure she's looking down on you and she's still proud.
Yeah, thank you.
And what was your family life like growing up?
Like I said, very tight budget. My mom was a single mom raising three children. I had an older sister and a younger brother. My mom's parents, my grandparents lived in town. We spent a lot of time with family growing up because we had a lot of family in town there. So, but other than that, we had a bit. Wycliffe back then was a really good community to grow up in, really good city services. So we had a lot of really good parks and pools and recreation opportunities, and we had lots of kids in the neighborhood and all my cousins in the area. So we spent a lot of time with family, like I said.
Thank you. Yeah, I remember you saying that you were raised by a single mom. Was your dad in the picture at any point, or did you have a relationship with him?
Early on, not much. When my parents split, my father got remarried and had some other children, or had another child. So, he was doing his thing, but, he lived on the west side. We saw him from time to time. I lived on the east side of Cleveland. And, like I said, it was primarily my mom that raised us.
Yeah. And seeing your mom toil to raise three kids and your father not being around, how did that affect you as a person?
Well, I mean, I definitely understand that you have to work hard to get ahead in life for sure. And, because my mom had a tight budget, anything we wanted, whether it was even anything from clothes or extras. We had to go out and get a job and earn it. So those are real strong lessons to impart on young kids growing up. That if you want something, you're gonna have to hustle to get it, and work hard, and you kind of earn what you get out in life, right?
Thank you. And going to college, you went to what's the name?
Mount Union, yeah.
Mount Union. How did you decide to go to that college? What was the process like?
Yeah, so I looked at a number of different colleges, and I was also a runner in high school. I ran track and cross country, and I was pretty good. I wasn't like a all-star or anything like that, but I was pretty good. I got some attention of colleges, and some schools wanted me to run there, and Mount Union was one of them, and they invited me to come down, and I decided to go there primarily because it was a really good fit, academically for me, and also, I felt like it was a really good connection with the coaching staff and the professors that I met before I ever decided to go there. So, it turned out to be a great experience. Mount Union was a really good experience for me because it was a small college environment, and it was still bigger than my high school, much bigger than my high school, even though the university only had about 1,100 students at the time. So, but overall, very positive experience.
Yeah, wow. So, did you run in college for
Yeah,
the?
I ran 2 years in college. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. So, what was that like?
Well, college athletics is almost like a full-time job. So I ran for 2 years and decided that, between the injuries and the time commitment, it was probably attention to.
I think we're having some technical difficulties, and hopefully we can have the. Okay, now you're back. Yes,
I don't know what's going on.
yes, we're back. Okay, welcome back.
All right.
Yes. So you are the first person to graduate from college in your family. What was that like for you?
Well, um, we all did different things. My sister went on and worked, and my brother went on and served in the U.S. Navy. I went to college, and I think that it was a proud moment for our family because obviously, like I said, my mom had wanted to go to college, wanted to become a lawyer. So, I think she was very happy that one of her kids had moved on. And it was the first one not to go to college, but I was definitely the first in my family to finish college. So I had a cousin before me had attended college, but I don't know that he had ever had finished by the time I started and finished. So, but yeah, now I have a nephew. He's gone on to finish college, and I think that's sort of the American dream that your children do a little bit better than you did growing up, and like I said, everybody gets the opportunity to live their version of the American dream.
Yeah. And you just not only finished college, you went on to another college to get your master's. And after that, you went into law school. What made you decide to go to law school even after earning a master's degree?
Well, the master's degree, I was in a PhD program for sociology. I was going to become a college professor, actually. And then when I got there and I completed the master's degree, I decided that instead of pursuing the rest of the PhD program, that I'd rather just go work on problems rather than study them. That's how I looked at it, at least. And going to law school, I thought would give me the tools to work on social issues and problems of today, right? So um, that was sort of the motivation behind it, is moving on and going to law school, get a law degree, give you the skills and the tools you need to really tackle some of the issues that we're confronted with on a day-to-day basis here in Ohio.
Okay. And you were not a traditional student in law school because you were working full time and also paying your own tuition. What
Right.
was
Yeah.
the
So
experience
yeah, I mean that's the only way I could afford to go to law school was to work full time and go to school in the evening. So again, I knew I was determined to make it through, and I had a lot of classmates that were in the same situation, and I was really grateful for the experience. Law school in the evening was great because they were folks that had families, or they were already working in professional careers, and it was a much more collaborative environment than maybe some of the other sort of horror stories I heard about going to law school during the day full time, where things were much more in a sort of a competition. People certainly worked hard to try to get good grades and things like that, but it was very much we're all in this together kind of approach for us students in the evening.
Yeah. And what kind of job were you doing during law school?
I worked for a bank. I worked for Key Bank. I worked for Chase Bank, and did some compliance auditing work.
Okay. And after law school, what was your first job as an attorney?
I worked at a couple different law firms, and Benish being one, and I went from there in-house to a couple different iterations of in-house work. I had my own solo practice for a while, and then onto the Ohio House.
Yeah. Having to work your way through law school, paying law school, and still made it and become a lawyer. How did that impact the way you carry yourself or some of the decisions you've made as a professional?
Well, I've always tried to be very practical in my approach to solving legal problems, right? So, um, you can certainly twist yourself into not thinking about legal problems from a theoretical perspective. To me, it's always been about what does the client need and what does the client want and how do you get there, and trying to give the client the best information you can in terms of advice to get them in a situation that they deem to be successful. I did commercial litigation work, a lot of, initially at least. That was my work, and you have to sometimes be honest with your client and say, look, this case is not a winner. You got to find a way to successfully navigate this and find a way that you could save face in a case if it's a losing case. And if it's going to cost the client more than it's worth, then you got to give them the really tough, honest advice. So I can't tell you how many times I've been asked the question, can I sue over this? And I say, yes, of course. Anybody with the filing fee in their pocket can file a lawsuit. The question is, do you want to, and is it the best outcome and option for you? Because let's talk about what you're trying to accomplish and what the best way forward is, and how do we use litigation, for example, as the best means to try to negotiate a resolution or something like that. So I've always just been a more practically minded lawyer in that way, and I think probably a lot of that does stem from, number one, having a professional career before practicing law, but also understanding and being mindful of cost and expense and what it takes to resolve legal problems for people.
Thank you. Tell us about your first job as a lawyer. How was the transition from the bank to a lawyer?
Well, I think having that professional experience really prepared me to enter into another professional atmosphere. So, I mean, that's how I think it helped. And, I think a lot of people start law firms after graduating law school and never having a professional job. And so it's a big steep curve in terms of learning how to act like a professional and be competent in your profession. I think having that transition from one professional career into another professional career was more seamless for me.
So, what inspired you to go into public service and politics?
Honestly, I think it was people just asked me to run. I was in my town and people asked me to consider running for city council. I hadn't previously thought about it, and I had been involved politically, knew who was running for office and who was involved in politics in our community and our county, but never really had any strong interest in running for office until someone approached me and said, you really need to run and really should consider running. And I thought, you know what, I'm tired of letting other people make decisions where I think, these decisions, I can make just as good of decisions as anybody else on city council. So that's kind of what inspired me. It was really sort of community driven. And I didn't really expect to continue running for different offices. I had thought that my practice was enough. But when our state representative decided not to run for reelection, I stepped up to fill his shoes, and here we are. So now I'm running for attorney general, because the need was there. I mean, I was asked to consider running for attorney general. I thought about it, and I thought, what I've seen in the state house has alarmed me about what's happening, not just the corruption, but a lot of things. And we need some attorney general, someone in this executive constitutional office is going to basically, operate in good faith to do what's best for Ohio instead of what's best for them personally.
Thank you. How would you describe your first campaign, for city council and the campaign you're running right now?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a lot of parallels, right? I mean, no one expected me to win my city council race. I took on a 20-year incumbent in that race, and everyone told me it was going to be hard. It was hard. Of course, it's hard. Elections are always difficult, um, but I'm not unfamiliar with a difficult situation, difficult race. So that has prepared me to run a. I don't know that a city council race prepares you to run a statewide race, except for the fact that you have to be prepared for the difficulties ahead and being prepared for the unexpected. So in that way, it's been helpful.
You're used to doing hard things.
Yeah, indeed.
So what was city council like for you these 5 years you spent there?
I'm sorry, your question again?
I said, what was city council like for you?
It was a great experience. I mean, I was on 5 years city council, and had a lot of really good colleagues that are really dedicated to improving our community, and it was a good learning place, obviously too. But local government is really where the rubber meets the road, when government and people really interact at the most potent level. And so you have daily interaction with local residents and trying to solve their problems, not too, kind of similar to what you are as a lawyer, trying to solve problems for people. So it was rewarding in a lot of ways to be able to help people. It was also very frustrating in a lot of ways, when things couldn't be done for people because they're either outside of our level of government or simply, we're just unable to devote the resources to the issue.
Thank you. So you said you were selected to fill the spot of State Rep Calabrese when he was retiring.
Yeah, Nick Calabrese had served in the legislature, I think 6 or 7 years, and decided, even though he could run for one more term, decided against running for that final term. But he was already on the ballot. He was on the ballot in 2018, and I think he was unopposed, actually, if I'm not mistaken. And he withdrew in, I think, July or August of 2018, which allowed the opposing party to put a candidate in the race, even though there wasn't one already in the race. So I ended up running a competitive, election in 2018 without having any money, having any volunteers or anything in place. So again, another opportunity to learn how to deal with difficult circumstances.
Yeah. What was it like for you?
I don't think I've had a normal race yet, to be honest with you, between my city council and my state house experience. I mean, I ran for re-election in 2020 during COVID, when we really couldn't knock on doors because we didn't know how people were going to react to that with COVID. And I was one of 3 Democrats in the state of Ohio that won their district despite Donald Trump winning. So all of these things just point to the fact that I'm used to difficult circumstances. I'm used to doing the hard work, and we've been often successful just by putting our nose to the grindstone.
Hard work is easy for you.
I don't know if it's easy. I'm just used to it.
You pull through it. Yes. And when you got to the state house as a legislator, what was it like for you on day one?
Well, we were deeply in the minority as Democrats. We're in the super minority, which means that the Republicans have more than enough votes to override a governor's veto, and they don't need Democrats to help do that. So there was really no reason for Republicans to work with Democrats at all, except for the fact that Democrats helped vote for the speaker at the time, which was Larry Householder. And obviously that decision has not worked out great, right, because of his mishaps and alleged criminal activity. So but at the very beginning, Democrats, because they had supported the winning team, had some relevance and had some ability to get bills passed. And that was an interesting time because there was a lot more bipartisanship when I first got there compared to now.
So how do you handle being a part of the minority and most of the decisions have been made by the majority? How do you handle that, the frustration, the disappointment?
Well, you still have work to do. You still represent, collectively, the 35 Democrats in the Ohio House represent millions of Ohioans, right? Regardless of who's in power. And you still have an obligation to make sure that their points are being heard. and that you're doing the work in committee and making sure that bad bills get challenged, that you offer alternatives to bad bills or some alternatives to language that might be less harmful in your view. So, I mean, there's still work to be done, and you still have to push the case that your view might be that your view should be considered, right? It's not often successful, and more often than not, they're not listening to you. But you still have work to do. You still have to do the job, and yes, it can be frustrating. But again, if the job's important, the work's important.
Thank you. And you are known to be a champion of anti-corruption.
Well, I think Ohio deserves a government that actually works for them, and I think people are rightfully frustrated at their government. I think they've been misdirected at where their frustration should be placed. I think people pay too much attention to what happens in Washington, D.C., and not nearly enough attention to what happens not just in their local communities, but in Columbus. Columbus has much more of an impact on what people do day to day in Ohio than certainly Washington, D.C. does. And people don't pay attention to it. And they're frustrated at Democrats, for example, in one year, and they're frustrated with Republicans another year, whoever happens to occupy the White House or runs Congress in D.C. But at the same time, we've had one party rule in this state for a long time. And if you're dissatisfied with what your local community looks like, you shouldn't look any farther than Columbus, Ohio.
Thank you. Tell us about some of the bills that you've sponsored against corruption.
Well, we think that, campaign finance needs to be addressed. I mean, people don't realize that the maximum amount of contribution you can make to, say, Tim Ryan, who's running for the United States Senate, one of 100 in the country, is $2,900, which is a lot of money. Most people don't write checks for $2,900. But the most you can write for a state representative candidate, someone running for your state House seat in Ohio, or governor of Ohio, is over $13,000. It's $13,741 and change. And I think that says all you need to know about who's running the state. It's big businesses, it's wealthy, connected people that can afford to write $13,741 checks. And I think that's outrageous. Because people, if money equals speech, as the Supreme Court has often said, then some people have a hell of a lot more speech than others, which means ordinary working folks in the state aren't really truly being represented. So that's one real strong issue I have with our system here, is the amount of contributions that rich people can write versus regular folks in Ohio. Secondly, we need more transparency, and we need some real strong accountability. We haven't had any of those things here. And that's why you still see corruption scandal after corruption scandal after corruption scandal in state government, because no one's minding the store, no one's holding anybody accountable, and the same system that's been in place continues to remain in place.
Thank you. You said something very deep. You said some people have more speech than others. They have louder voice than others. And we need more transparency and accountability.
That's the only way you're going to get the government working for you. People were upset about a lot of things in the last year about their government, right? Well, I mean, look at what's happening with the gerrymandering, right? I mean, gerrymandering, all that means is they're trying to diminish people's voices. They want to make sure that some politicians win, regardless of what people's voice is, right? Regardless of what people have to say about it. So gerrymandering is, whether you're Republican or Democrat, we should all ask and demand for representative and challenging and fair districts. Fair districts meaning districts that are competitive districts that where if a representative is not doing the job of the people, then they should be bounced out of office. They should at least have the opportunity to be kicked out by the voters. If you gerrymander, you basically guarantee that those incumbents always win and the people always lose. And so that's why I've been dead set against that, because I think that's how you end up with two parties that send their most extreme people to the government, and you have nobody left in the middle to work on the solutions in the middle.
Thank you. So do you see yourself as being in the middle or on one side?
Like I said, I mean, I practice law with pragmatism in mind. I think I practice my public service in the same way. I mean, we have to be mindful of, number one, that I don't have all the answers or solutions. I have to be open to the fact that the other side might have different solutions and different ideas, and what's best for everybody, right? How do we get to a solution of compromise? I think that's what's been missing in government, because we have too many people thinking about winners and losers instead of what's best for our state, what's the best policy for our communities. And, I think that what we've seen is, what happens is when you have corruption, when you have too much money in the system, they're not focused on, what's best for Ohioans. They're focused on what's best for individual politicians or individual businesses. And I'm pretty sure that that means that public policy is last on their list.
Thank you. Do you sometimes receive negative reactions because of your stance against corruption?
I think more than anything, we've been dismissed. Again, probably because I've been in the minority. But it doesn't mean the majority party shouldn't or can't focus on anti-corruption techniques to clean up their own house, right? I mean, in Tennessee, we saw that the Speaker of the Tennessee House of Representatives was indicted for their version of corruption. And Republicans in their state, or again, Republican state dominated by Republicans in the government, they started passing legislative reforms that address corruption. So, this is not a Republican or Democrat thing. This is not a right or left thing. It's a right or wrong issue, right? What's right for the state? What's wrong for the state? Letting corruption fester, or letting a system like this fester and without any kind of challenges or changes, means that you're going to continue to have the same problems going forward. So I think more than anything, people have just been dismissive. They want to get back to work and pretend like business as usual. I think that's a mistake.
What was it like for you to go against a powerful person like the former House Speaker, householder?
Well, people didn't like it. I can tell you that. Look, I oppose people not just in the Republican caucus, but in the Democratic caucus, who just wanted to get back to work and didn't want to focus on anything related to Larry Householder or the largest public corruption scandal in the state's history. But I stood up on the floor the day that Larry Householder was indicted and suggested that he be expelled, made the motion that he be expelled, and our Republican colleagues all voted to keep him there. And then, when it came back in the following term, after Larry Householder had been elected, I was told, not just by Republicans, but by Democrats, like, hey, what are we going to do? And they said, nothing, let them figure it out. And I said, well, that's not appropriate. Look, I took a lot of heat inside and outside the caucus, both from Republicans and from Democrats, who simply did not like me challenging someone like Larry Householder and holding him accountable. But doing the right thing isn't often easy. It's absolutely necessary, though. And that's not an easy path, but you got to have people willing to take that path if you're going to move the state forward.
Thank you. How did you handle the heat?
Look, I'm, prayer and contemplation. Let's leave it at that.
Thank you. And you're currently running to become the next Ohio Attorney General. Tell us about your campaign.
Yeah, so when I initially ran, we decided that the tagline for our campaign is "Let's take back our state." And, I think that applies in a lot of different ways. It's let's take back our state from the people that are corrupt. Let's take back our state from people that are passing legislation that's so extreme, it's out of step with what Ohio wants. Let's take our state back from people that don't think women should have rights. Let's take back our states for people in the LGBTQ community, these folks that don't think they should have any rights. So, for a lot of these reasons, Ohio seems to be out of step with where Ohioans really are. And that's because of the extremist legislature that we have due to all this gerrymandering and dark money and all the things that we've been talking about. So we're running against all these things. We're running to change Ohio, to restore women's rights to reproductive freedom, and to make sure that Ohio is a welcoming place, not a hostile place for women, not a hostile place for people of color, not a hostile place for people in the LGBTQ community. And that we move Ohio forward, that we create good jobs for everybody and have opportunity, so Ohio can be number one in opportunity again, instead of number one in the country for corruption like it has been.
What prompted you to run for this office?
Well, candidly, I thought about, what our opportunity was to clean up the state. And I could have run for re-election to the Ohio House and been one of 99 there, and probably been deeply in the minority again. But like I said, we're not going to flip the Ohio House. We're not going to flip the Ohio Senate. We're not even going to come close. And so I thought, well, we can flip, the statewide seats. Democrats can elect a governor. Democrats can elect a new attorney general, secretary of state. You can elect some Supreme Court justices like Brunner and Zayas and Jameson, who are actually going to stand up for the rule of law in this state and hold people accountable and hold them in contempt when they fail to do what they're required to do under Ohio Constitution. And we can actually begin to change some things and get Ohio back on an even keel like it used to be. Ohio used to be a place that people viewed as a very moderate, very practical state full of really good, smart people that really cared about their community. I think that Ohio still exists, but we've been run and dominated by people that have lost their way, and we're trying to get our state back.
Thank you. There are people out there who don't understand what an attorney general does. Can you educate us as to the duties of an AG?
Sure, that's a great question, and I appreciate you asking it, because I think people, and I make the mistake too. I presume that people know what the attorney general does, and people know that the attorney general is an attorney, but doesn't really know it's Ohio's attorney. The Ohio Attorney General's office is a vast office, a very important, broad office. Other than the governor's office, I don't know one office in the statewide offices that really touch on almost every aspect of everyday life in Ohio. It's the largest public interest law firm in the state of Ohio. It does things like consumer protection, environmental protection, civil rights issues, criminal justice issues. There's so many different aspects of workers' compensation. And obviously it represents government agencies and courts. So there's a lot of things the AG's office does and can help shape public policy in the state by using the legal system. So, for example, consumer protection, filing lawsuits against companies that pollute, or that's an environmental case, but filing lawsuits against companies that steal money from Ohioans would be a good example. So there's all kinds of things that the Attorney General's office actually does. It can be used for good, and it can also be used to protect big business and protect, wealthy, connected people, which is what has been going on here in the last several years here in Ohio.
Yeah. To the ordinary Ohioan who doesn't know what the Attorney General's office does and who doesn't care about the office, how can you educate them about the importance of that position?
Well, I think people care about being stolen from, right? And Ohioans have had money stolen from them and continue to do so because we've had no state attorney general to step up and do the work that they're supposed to be doing. First Energy and other companies literally passed a bill that's put charges on your electric bill every month that still cost Ohioans $267,000 every day. That's to fund 2 power plants on the Ohio River, one of which is actually located in Indiana. This is just the tip of the iceberg. Ohioans have spent $280 million on out-of-state coal plants. So, I mean, if you don't have an attorney general that's willing to hold people accountable for criminal wrongdoing, and again, we're talking 2 years later, not one person has gone to prison yet for the largest public corruption scandal in the state's history. And that's something the attorney general should be correcting. And that's, directly affects everybody's pocketbooks, because every month when you pay your electric bill, if you look at your my electric bill last month was $100. About $40 of that was actual usage, and the rest of it was fees and other charges. Well, where do you think those fees and other charges come from? Where do you think they go? They go to companies like First Energy. They go to companies like AEP. And when I see things in the summertime where AEP is, turning off people's power because they don't have enough capacity to make sure people can run their AC in the summertime, that to me signals like that they're not investing their money right, and they're continuing to take more money and give it to their shareholders and their executives, and not investing in the things that they should be to help Ohio. So this is what the Ohio Attorney General does. It's supposed to protect Ohioans and look out and ask these types of questions and hold them accountable when they're not doing what they should be on the behalf of Ohioans.
Thank you. Roe v. Wade was overruled on your wedding day.
Yeah.
How has that impacted your stance on reproductive rights?
Well, so as you said, I got married this year on June 24th, 2022, which is the same day Dobbs came down overturning Roe versus Wade. Basically for the first time in American history, Ohioans had a fundamental freedom revoked from them, taken away from them. And it made me alarmed that if that type of freedom, that type of legal right can simply be ripped away from people, what else is on the table? And Clarence Thomas said exactly what's on the table. Same-sex marriage is not one that he said, or same-sex marriage, interracial marriage, he didn't say, but that's certainly on the table. And if they're going to take away the right to privacy, that Griswold versus Connecticut case, which was the sort of precursor to Roe v. Wade, all of these things are on the table now because of the Dobbs decision. Precedent has been overturned, a 50-year precedent. But personally, having that happen on our wedding day was really alarming. At a time when my wife and I are deciding to start our family, people are being told they don't have the right and to decide for themselves when and how they start theirs. So, it just it made it very apparent and it made it very visceral to what's happening in our country when extremists like the ones here in Ohio get control of your state government. They're going to take away your rights, and you don't have to look farther than the same day, June 24th, Dave Yost, my opponent in this race, ran to court and implemented a 6-week abortion ban, one of the most restrictive abortion bans in the country, mere hours after the Dobbs decision came out, right? So that to me was egregious. And, I think women in this state should be outraged because what has happened is they no longer can legally get the medical care that they often need in situations where they become impregnated. For example, if they have a type of pregnancy that's going to lead to their demise, their injury, their possible death. Providers now in the state don't know what the law really is because they haven't clarified it, and the law is so extreme and there's no exceptions that are clear that it's going to make it very hard for them to get care.
What are the roles of the Attorney General in preserving some of these rights that are under threat?
Well, the Attorney General could be protecting rights or they can be attacking rights, which is what Dave Yost has been doing, right? So instead of protecting people's civil rights, their constitutional rights, and I'll give you another example, LGBTQ rights, Dave Yost filed a lawsuit that basically attacks LGBTQ youth in this state, challenging the USDA guidance on anti-discrimination policies under Title IX. Title IX basically says you cannot discriminate against anyone on the basis of age or race or sex. And then in the Bostock decision from 2020, the Supreme Court, U.S. Supreme Court said that sex under Title IX also includes protections for LGBTQ folks, right? So the USDA guidance is consistent with the Bostock decision. And here we have an Attorney General in the state of Ohio who's basically suing for the right to discriminate against LGBTQ youth in school lunch programs. So you have an Attorney General who's attacking people, different groups in this state, and doing it shamelessly. And an Attorney General that actually has everybody's interest at heart wouldn't do that. And I would not do that. I would be fighting for everybody's civil rights, regardless of whether or not they share my political perspective.
Thank you. And after Roe v. Wade was overturned, we had a situation of a 10-year-old who had to travel to Indiana to obtain an abortion, even though she was raped. You had a reaction to that based on what the current Attorney General said about that situation.
Yeah, first of all, I think let's back up, right? The 6-week abortion ban, one of the most restrictive in the country, goes into effect on June 24th. And so people start asking the questions, right? What is the practical impact of a 6-week abortion ban on Ohioans living here in the state? What's happening to people here in the state, girls and women and others who no longer have reproductive freedom, right? And so someone said, hey, I had a patient who was 10 years old who came to our state, Indiana at the time, who had to leave Ohio and come to Indiana to get care because she had been raped and impregnated by a rapist, and Ohio would have made her carry a rapist baby. Okay. And then Dave Yost went on national TV and said that never happened, that person probably didn't exist. And that was outrageous on so many levels. Number one, because he didn't know for sure whether or not it happened. He never asked anybody, clearly, because obviously it was a lie. It blew up in his face the next day. And he's a former prosecutor. He knows that these types of situations happen, unfortunately, all the time. There are often victims who are raped and impregnated by their rapist, and now are going to have to leave the state of Ohio to get care. In fact, a couple of weeks after this whole debacle, we saw in Cleveland, there was a story where a 10 and a 12-year-old had been raped by the rapist, and they also had to leave the state to get the care they needed because of Ohio's laws. So this is not a one-off situation. And Dave Yost going on national TV saying there's no chance that this happened was a lie. And he also misstated the law, right? He said that the 10-year-old didn't have to leave the state because there's an exception built in the law. And technically there's an exception written in the law, but nobody has clarified what it means. And no doctor is going to use that and roll the dice of losing their license or worse, going to prison because no one has interpreted what the exception actually means, So I find all of those things incredibly offensive. If I sound angry, I am angry about it. I think everybody should be upset and angry about this because it's unbelievable that an attorney general would get it that wrong, would lie to American people, would get the law wrong, and then, by the way, refuse to apologize when it's pointed out to him that he was completely mishandled the situation.
Thank you. So what do you hope to do differently from the current and from what the current attorney general is doing?
Well, I mean, I'll at least tell the truth, right? And if I were to get it wrong, I'd apologize. But I think women need to know, and Ohioans need to know what their rights are. And I think the attorney general could help clarify what the state of the law is in Ohio. They could clarify where and when people can get medical care, like abortion care in the state of Ohio, or if they can and will be able to leave the state, whether they're going to have access to the victims fund. There's a victims fund in Ohio. Whether they're going to have access if they leave the state and have to get reimbursed for medical care outside of Ohio. These are the types of things that I'm going to advocate for. And by the way, I'm going to protect people's legal rights to be able to travel outside of the state to get care they want. If they want to leave Ohio to get an abortion or get other medical reproductive care, they should be able to leave the state. I think that's the next thing that some folks might do. Some of these extremists might start challenging people's right to leave the state to get medical care. And this is not a stretch, by the way. It was addressed in the Dobbs case. This very question was addressed in the Dobbs case, and there was some skepticism as to whether or not that would be constitutional. That doesn't mean people aren't going to try to do it.
What do you want people to remember about you when they go to the polls?
Well, that I'm just like them, that I grew up here in Ohio, that I worked hard to get to where I am. And I think they deserve people in Columbus representing them that understands where they come from, where understands what the challenges are in Ohio. And, someone like them fighting for them. I've always been for the people. And, I live in my 1,400 square foot house here in Parma. I'm never going anywhere. I'm not a rich person, but I'm dedicated to the people of Ohio.
Thank you. And thank you for your time on the show today. And you spent, almost an hour educating the community. What does it mean for you to come on this show to talk to the people?
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to get a chance for people to get to know me a little bit. And I appreciate you putting up my website there, crossmanforohio.com. I would encourage people to follow me on social media at Crossman for Ohio or Jeff A. Crossman on Twitter. Learn about what I stand for. I think we've gotten too partisan in our politics in our country. And I think we got to get back to a place where people can vote on the person and what they stand for, what their values are, what positions they've taken, and what their experience looks like, rather than on simply looking at party label as an indicator of who they should or shouldn't vote for. So I hope that that's what people take away from this, is that I'm not trying to be a partisan. I think we need to get away from deeply partisan politics and start focusing on what matters, what's best for the people of Ohio.
Thank you. And thank you for your time. And for those of you watching, you can check out the website, crossmanforohio.com. And thank you also for your time. Thank you for watching. And for those of you listening to this as a podcast, we appreciate your time as well. Until next time, take care and stay blessed. Bye for now.
Thank you.